Okay, my guest today is Joanne Chan. And for more than 20 years, Joanne has been helping hotels, hospitality, tourism, travel, lifestyle, and retail businesses to grow their brands globally through the use of creative translation, or transcreation as it's known services. She leads the IPPWORLD Business Development team and has assisted brands in appealing to the China Outbound Travel Market through the development of their company Shanghai office, where she was based for 10 years. The IPPWORLD customer testimonial list reads like a who's who in the hotel industry for Asia, with names like Ritz-Carlton, Hilton, Marriott, and also Changi Airport. And today we're going to talk about how to engage and convert global consumers and how to be multi-market ready. Joanne, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Catherine, for having me. Thanks. This is a great opportunity, to share more information on what brands should do, when they're planning on going global.
Yeah, so maybe for the beginning, you could tell us a little bit, what inspired you to get into international business?
Because the world is not just made up of where I am or where I live. So I'm a Singaporean. I'm currently in Singapore. That's where I'm based at. So the world is not just made up of me, buying goods within my country or within my market, but the world is made up of 8 billion now? Are we at 7 billion or 8 billion? The world is huge. The potential is massive. So there is no need for companies or businesses or brands to only focus within their market or within their home countries. So because of the size of the markets, they can go beyond their shores, which means they can expand their business just beyond their home markets. And this is really interesting because when it comes to international business, there's a lot of little components that make up of that word. So yes, you can sell to somebody, maybe over in Austria, you can sell to somebody over in China or in Mauritius, but how does this whole thing work? What is the best way to move forward, on when you want to expand your business into the global markets? So I think this is really interesting, and it all comes down to content. No content, it makes it difficult to share your story, to motivate or convince your buyers that your product or service is good. Yes, you can have all the branding, all the colors, but what is I would say, the important component in terms of converting your audiences? It comes down to information, and specifically information in their preferred language.
So is that where you'd suggest that people should start when they're talking about how to go overseas? That they should start with translation, or that they should start with localization of some of their offerings?
Of course. So when we talk about international business or going overseas, you talk about the administrative end of things, setting up a business, registering your office, hiring, and things like that. So I'm not going to talk about that because, that is a must do for everybody. Let's put it that way, for any business that wants to venture overseas. So in terms of wanting to, especially in today's situation, in today's environment, brands are talking about the customer experience.
Yep.
So when you are a brand and you do really well on your home ground, and now you want to move into a new country, and a country that does not speak your language, so that's where the communication or the language barrier comes in. So as a brand, you need to overcome this language barrier, which is to have content or information or guides that are available in the language of your audience. So when brands talk about customer experience journey, with today's technology and all of us that are, connected to the World Wide Web, the customer experience journey starts when a customer is searching for your product or your service.
And it's also, I would say that also so many people now, they underestimate this this part of the let's say they
experience.
underestimate this part of the work, and they don't think, they don't realize how important it is to have something specially created for the market that they're targeting.
Yeah, that's true, because they think that just because they have like a content in a local language, um, done by a software, and that's going to work. No, it doesn't, because when it comes to human beings, you know, there's a culture of the market. There is the traditions, there is the language, there is a target audiences in terms of the demographics, the profiles. So as a brand, you want to target them, you want to engage them, and you have to do it through good content that's available in their language, so that they can read, they understand what you're selling, they can probably be more emotionally connected to your brand.
Yeah.
And that's when, you know, there's a possibility of converting them from just a, you know, not just a visitor to your website, but to a customer. So give you an example, you can have a website with beautiful pictures, stunning photography and stuff like that. But if you've got a bad language, a local language content, you're probably not going to sell. You're probably not going to convert them. Why? Because customers are such that, you know, let's just take 2 steps backwards. In 72% or is it 73% of global consumers would only purchase or spend time on websites that are available in their language.
Yeah.
English is now no longer the #1 language in the world. It's not, you know, it's spoken by what, less than 10%, I think, or 20% of the whole world's population. So if a website or a brand only has their information in English language only, they are missing out on a huge chunk of the global market.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, so with that said, brands who are planning to go overseas in non-English speaking markets, or to foreign markets, or markets that do not speak the same home language as them, then they need to offer their information in the respective languages.
I mean, I think even between those markets that speak English, then you still need to take a look at it, because I know for example, a lot of UK companies, then they think about going maybe to Singapore, for example, or to Hong Kong, and they think, okay, English is also a national language, so just the same, but it's not, because there's still some local variations of vocabulary and spelling, and if you go to the States or if you go to Australia, it's different again. And to be fair, as a Brit, then it's quite, if somebody sends you a document or a website to look at, and you know that it's very US based, then it feels strange. It doesn't make you feel that comfortable when you read it. You know, the spellings are wrong and all that kind of thing. Language use is different.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, you need to respect your markets, you know, your audiences, wherever they're from. Respect them in terms of the language that they use in a country, the culture, you know, the traditions. Some colors are considered taboo in certain markets. You know, the other thing in terms of localization, you also need to take note of like currency exchange. So if you are, you know, if your product is in Great British pounds and you want to sell to somebody in China, it's pointless trying to tell them, you know, the pound sign, you know, you should localize it to RMB or Chinese yuan. So, you know, localize it. So in that sense, it's all part of the big picture of localization. Another interesting thing, I think for you, when you write your numbers, like 10,000, so you have a 10, a dot, 000.
Yes.
And that means 10,000. But for people like us on this side of the globe, we are not familiar with the 10 dot 000. We are familiar with 10 comma 000, which is the opposite from what the Europeans are doing. So again, these are little things that has to be localized, because when I see 10, a full stop and a triple zero, I do a double take, like, is that 10,000? Ah, okay. Because it's a European brand. Ah, okay. So that means 10,000.
Yep.
Same thing.
But it gets
I
me
think
too
it's,
sometimes, even though I'm so
yeah,
long in Austria.
yeah, because you're like, okay, how? So, and then the other thing, which is also interesting, would be, you know how we use the letter K to
Yes.
denote thousands, like 10K, 50K. Some countries, it's not common to
No.
use K in certain countries, because, like Thailand, for example, you know, if your English says 50K reviews or something, you have to spell out 50,000 in Thai. You
Mhm.
cannot just put 50K followed by a Thai word, you know, before and after, because it's not something that's commonly used.
Yes.
So these are little small things that brands, if you're offering, you know, their service or product or services to global audiences, they have to take note of where their customers are based at. Same thing with dates, you know, like day, month, year, or year, month, day.
That's okay, but the worst is when you have month, day, year,
Yeah.
and it's maybe somebody says, if somebody says 06, 01, 2021, do they talk about January or are they talking
Or
about,
June.
yes, this is,
Yeah, correct. So these are little things that these are little things that make up the customer experience journey for a brand.
yeah,
So because for us at IPP World, we support the hospitality, the hotels, the travel, tourism, lifestyle, retail sectors. So we help them to transcreate or creatively translate their content from one language to another language. At the same time, marrying or merging their brand identity, the tone of voice. So which means to say, when we localize something for hotel that is targeting Japan or Korea, the final Japanese and Korean content would resonate with the audiences.
yeah,
And if it's a hotel brand, for example, a high-end hotel brand, a luxurious hotel group, so their target audiences are people of a certain level in terms of whether it's the income, whether it's the education, whether it's the interest. So when it comes to the Japanese or the local language content, the style that's written or that's localized will also resonate with those audiences.
yeah. You have to have your level of language adapted to the person who's reading it.
Yeah.
And it's a different kind of language than if you're talking to a student for a youth hostel, something like that.
Yeah, or you are a brand that's catering, like a fast consumer goods, fast
Yeah,
FMCG, fast moving consumer goods that's catering to anybody. The writing styles, the tone will also be different as opposed to someone that is targeting a specific group of audiences. So when we do the work for our hotel clients, we need a lot of information, like who are they targeting? Where is what is the brand positioning, where are they going, what's the direction of the brand, what's the purpose of this content. And with all this information, and even though the content is provided to us, say for example the English is written with the US dollar signs, or the US we are writing the dates and stuff like that, but when we move into the next level, which is the different languages, we have to localize them into the local market currency, the local market way of writing dates. Like for example in Thailand, they do not use like what we do 2020. They have their Thai way of writing the year.
okay.
That's interesting. Have you heard about that?
No, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah. So in Thailand, the year for us, we are used to 2020, but in Thailand, I think they write their year based on the king. Do not quote me on this,
Oh,
but I think
okay.
it's the year now is probably like 25 something or 26 something. So that only happens in Thailand. So yeah, so these are the little localization things that we talk about, and to appeal, to create or elevate a customer experience journey, so that when a person who is looking, say, for example, a hotel or wants to buy a product, the first thing they'll do, they go online, they do a search, they see your website, they visit the website, and this is when the brand has an opportunity to convert them,
Yes.
to engage them, to make them feel comfortable, because it is also said that 57% of global consumers in the whole world, they would prefer, their priority, they would rather have information in their own language.
Yeah.
That is more important than the price factor itself.
But is it more important for the companies? I mean, you're dealing with high-end companies, so maybe they've already realized that it's essential for them to have transcreation. But I think a lot of smaller companies, they feel, or they treat the transcreation or the translation of a website as something that's to be done as cheaply as possible. Maybe they know somebody, the cleaner's cousin, who speaks the language, or they go to Google, yeah, another favorite. And so often I see companies who have very badly translated websites because they didn't see that this is an essential factor of their, or it's an essential part of the success of their customer journey. So what do you recommend for companies who are starting out? Should they look for, how should they go about looking for an agency who is suitable for their particular needs? What are the most important factors to consider when they're choosing how to localize?
Interestingly, regarding Google, for Google themselves says, do not rely or do not use automated translation software for your content. Why? In terms of the Google search engine, they would think that it's spam, which means they will rank your website lower. The credibility of website goes down,
Yeah.
if you were to use an automated translation software on your website. So that came from Google themselves. Google themselves also advise companies to invest a little bit more in getting professional translation companies or professional translators to do the work.
Good
Because
lobbying.
that's,
Good lobbying.
huh?
Good lobbying work.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so that's one interesting point I'd like to share. So in terms of finding out which is the best agency for you, or if you're starting out small, my suggestion, my advice, with smaller brands, or a startup brand, is first to localize a landing page.
Okay.
So your website, you have multiple products, you've got lots of information on it. We can do it batch by batch, or tabs by tabs, or create a microsite only for that market. So instead of having, maybe your English website has got 20, 30 pages, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having that, or 20, 30, 40 tabs, instead of having that, create a microsite, say for Japan, create a microsite for Malaysia or Thailand or China, and only have five tabs. So you talk about the most important thing will be the landing page. Talk about localized pages where generates revenue.
Okay.
Because this is where you want them to be comfortable. You want them to spend the money with you, but they need to read, they need to have comfortable, they need to be able to trust your brand. So localized pages that generates revenue, localized pages that teach them, or guide them the purchasing process.
Okay. Yeah.
So you have a little microsite. You can start with a microsite first. So you generate the traffic, and then as the business grow, or that's when you can slowly increase the investment to create the whole site in a local language.
So for example, if I was looking to have a site in, I don't know, maybe in German, then I should look to have a landing page and all of the details about my key products and about how the, let's say, the shopping cart journey, but I don't know, the blog or the some kind of additional resources could be left as a second priority.
Selected blogs that are relevant, or blog posts that are relevant to your market, things that it's, that's trending now in the market that they would like to read, because blogs helps with content marketing and not just banner advertising that you're trying to flash in everybody's faces. So you want to look at if content marketing as another way to generate traffic and also revenue. So you select, or you can even choose selected products or services that you want to focus on first.
Okay.
So you start with that first, because bear in mind, when a brand has a microsite for a particular market, probably is the brand's first step into that market.
Yes.
It's their first step going to that market, and which means it is the brand is in the process of creating or driving brand awareness, letting the consumers know in that country that, hey, we are here, this is what we can offer, these are the benefits, blah blah blah, and stuff like that. So having said that, your customers or your consumers, they need to be comfortable with your brand. They need to be made aware of your brand. So when they come to your website, have the landing page done, products and services, maybe even a selected few products and services, selected blog posts, because that helps to further share more information about who you are as a brand, your unique selling, points, key factors and stuff like that.
Also, I guess it establishes trust as well, that it shows that it shows competency. This is
yeah, and have it done correctly. And then you expand it further into your social media channels, because once you've localized the blog post, you can use it on your social media channels.
Yeah.
So you may have like 10, 15, 20 blog posts already on your website. Choose the top 3 or top 4. And with these blog posts, you can also optimize it for SEO reasons, your keywords reasons, optimize it.
And is this something that a good agency will also offer support with? This kind of SEO and further localization, not only the translation, but also, let's say, a kind of consultancy role.
Yeah, correct. So this is what a translation agency or translation vendor would need to do. So obviously they need to have the experience and the knowledge in that specific industry. They need to have the proper teams of linguists, translators, editors, reviewers. And then they also need to understand how the whole website, the CMS works. And they also need to understand how to optimize the local language content with keywords that allows the brands in terms of appearing, in terms of the Google searches or Baidu search and things like that. So all these is focusing on the content, making sure that the brand can be found anywhere in the World Wide Web.
Yeah. And so it's not just purely a translation of the words that are on the page, but it's also a whole shift of the mindset of the page so that it's in the local culture of the market that you're trying to target, or of the consumers that you're trying to target.
Right. And the translation agency will also help to advise that, you have integrated this in, say, US dollars. You know what? You have to change it.
Yeah.
Do a conversion, whether it's a manual conversion or use an API to convert it, use a conversion, because it allows them, your readers in China, to understand how much this costs. Yes. Because if you tell me it costs $5, what is that in RMB? I'm not earning USD. My home currency is in RMB. So how much is that? So these are the little, value-added services, I would say, that a good translation agency or a good localization agency should have and must do. Yeah. And then if you're talking about online translation softwares or your neighbor's helper or your grandma's friend, they do not have the knowledge in all these. They can speak the language. Yep. They're bilingual. Yep. But they do not know, in terms of SEO optimizing, they may not be aware of what are the choice of words used that can make or break engagement.
Yes.
A customer's engagement with your brand, for example.
Yeah, I mean, specialist job. It's not just something that you give to a student and say, please just.
Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, I think let's reverse the scenario. Most of our websites are all in English, right? That is like the number one language that everybody has. All brands have English plus a local language. So brands spend a lot of money on getting the top copywriter in English, getting the best photographer, you know, fantastic visual designs and stuff like that. So they have a lot of investment in this part here because they know that the English content must be written well, etc., etc. Isn't it a pity when they do not maintain the same high level quality in the other languages?
Yes.
Means to say they take a English content that has been copywritten by the top creative writer in this advertising agency or marketing agency, you know, fantastic content, fantastic copy. You know, the more you read the English, the more connected you are to the brand. And they take that copy and they put it into a software. And expecting to have the same impact in French, German, Japanese, Arabic. It's not going to happen.
No.
Because the original copy, the source copy in English, was not written by a robot or a computer or software. It was written by somebody, a person who has the knowledge and the experience to help your brand convert the online traffic into customers.
Yeah. I think people need to understand that online translation software is great just to get the gist of a text.
Yeah.
In the language.
I use it.
If somebody sends me something in Polish, then I'll put it through online translation to know what is it about, but it doesn't tell. It's not the same as a professional translation. If I realize it's interesting enough that I need to know more, then I have to go and get it translated by somebody who knows properly.
Yeah. That's basically it. Because I think human beings, you know, as much as we are weird in some ways, you know, as human beings, I think more importantly, when you know, I always like to share this example, you know, with my clients when they read a book, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, when they read a book, you get a lot of different levels of emotions. You know, you may break down in tears, you may be upset, you know, reading a story, or you could be laughing, or it could make you feel really motivated and upbeat about life. You know, these are the words in the story that is creating the emotions in us as we read it. So let's think about it from your customer point of view, your consumer's point of view. They are now reading your content. How can you move them? How can you get them to be emotionally connected to them? How can you create that visual imagery in their minds that my hotel, you know, by the sea has got fantastic views? How do you do that? How can you tell them this? Yes, you have the photos, but a photo can only hold their attention for so long before, you know, they close the window, they leave the site. So words or content is king when it comes to marketing. Content is king. You need to have good local language content in any language, you know, especially those of your target audiences.
Yeah, I'd be interested, Joanne. We spoke a little bit at the beginning, or I mentioned when I introduced you that you spent 10 years in Shanghai.
Yeah, I did.
How did you find that? Because I mean, coming from Singapore, I imagine you also grew up speaking Chinese.
Yeah. It was interesting. So I moved to Shanghai in 2004, around January, end of 2003, early for 2004. And this was just after China joined the WTO. Yeah, so it was interesting. And I was there from 2004 till 2014 when I moved back to Singapore, when I came back home here. As much as I understand the language, as much as I am Chinese, but it's only by race, there are differences between someone from China and someone from Singapore. First thing, our pronunciation of Chinese words differ. The choice of words are also slightly different. The mindsets, the mannerisms, there's nothing wrong or right about it. It's just different.
Different.
Yeah, it was different. You know, and I think up to today, I always tell my friends or whoever that I meet that are like maybe just graduated from school. I always tell them, my advice to them is to go to China, because it's a different playground, it's a different market, it's 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 just different
It's
from
just
what we
different.
know.
And also, I guess coming from Singapore, it's so big. There's so much of China. It doesn't matter which business you're in. China is just such a huge market, and it's also so varied that
It is.
you can find market for almost any kind of product.
Yeah, it's so big. You talk about the population itself, you talk about culture, it's so diverse. I think there's 56 ethnic groups. There are, Mandarin is the official spoken, but they've got many dialects,
Yes.
regional dialects, local dialects. People, it's interesting. And I think I have to say that I'm actually very fortunate to be able to see the rise of China,
Yeah. This was
after they
certainly an
joined the
interesting
WTO.
period to be in China.
It is, you just see the boom, from, I mean, one of the things, I guess one of the big thing was actually the building, the construction of underground tube, metro. So, and highways, expressways, they've got like 5 or 6 levels of expressways. So you can see the transformation and the development of the country. And looking back, I would love to probably see more of China. I have not finished, touring around China. There's still so many places.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
For me too.
It's
I mean, China was also somewhere that I first visited in 2008, 2009, and then after that for 10 years, almost on a monthly basis.
yeah,
So, and it's fascinating to see the pace of change of things in China.
yeah.
And also I know from friends who are, let's say, from the northern end of China, but living in Guangzhou, that
Mm,
linguistically this is quite different,
yep.
and that also Chinese people don't always understand some words that people from other regions are using. So
Regions, yeah. Yeah.
I
It's a
guess
it is fascinating, and I mean, they are where they are today in today's, in a sense of economy, in terms of the size of the market and stuff like that, and it's fascinating. I really did enjoy my time there. It's because coming from Singapore, we are so small, it's like a little bubble here in a good way. So when you're in China, especially when they just open up to the world, and they probably have not seen much of, I would say, foreigners. But I mean, I can pass off as a local easily, because of how I look and because of the fact that I can speak the language. But it's just interesting,
yes,
it's something that it's an experience that money cannot buy, let's put it that way.
definitely. And China has an energy. This is that
Yeah.
a lot of markets are not so dynamic in the way that they're developing, or there's very few markets who are developing or who have developed as dynamically as China in the last 20 years probably.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that even though I can pass off as a local person, because of how I look and my race and the language, in the linguistic end of things, but I did experience culture shocks.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, interestingly, I wrote a white paper on this.
Okay.
It's just it's based. So I moved back to Singapore, and then I was looking back and thinking, how would foreigners, somebody like yourself, or someone that has got no knowledge about China, other than what they learn from the internet, or from what they read and from what they hear, how would they? What information do they need, for survival reasons? Or on how to do business in China. I mean, I've got lots of experiences, good experiences and bad experiences, when it comes to our office in Shanghai, So what I did was I decided to put together all my experiences in a white paper, and sharing information on what foreign brands should do when it comes to marketing to the world's largest outbound tourism group.
Yeah.
Right down to traditions, right down to values. It's because these are little things that kind of shocked me. You know, even as a
This is
Chinese
coming
person,
from the same culture that you said you, or let's say from a similar cultural background, that
similar culture, yeah.
same
And even
roots.
though, correct, you know, my great grandparents are from China in Fujian.
Mm-hmm.
So it passes down, right? You know, through my parents, through my aunties, to my grandma, and then passes down to us and stuff like that. You know, we celebrate Chinese New Year. I use the chopsticks perfectly well, and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if somebody like me, you know, can encounter culture shocks and like, huh, you know, scratching my head, like, why is this correct? You know, how is this done? You know, it's not something that I'm familiar with. I think it's going to be worse for somebody who has zero knowledge of the culture, you know, or the traditions, or even the language, you know. So I put together a white paper. You can download it from the website.
Okay,
So
so
it's,
what was your biggest culture shock, just as an example?
oh, I guess.
Europeans usually say spitting.
Spitting is not really. I wouldn't say spitting is common in Asia, but it's not something that you're not used to. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say spitting. Culture shock. I don't know. I think I'm becoming a local. I've been localized. I need culture shock.
I mean, I guess if you go to China from Singapore, it's not so. Singapore is very clean. Singapore is very regulated in lots of ways. And China, I guess, at least in 2004, wasn't as driven by it was driven by regulations, but not the same kind of regulations. You have regulations, but Chinese don't keep to them in the same way.
Yeah. I think the initial one was because I went over there. I was given the task to to register our business, you know, to get the office up and running. So, and then I went into the next level of
Mm-hmm.
hiring people and stuff like that. Um, there is one incident whereby I had to let somebody go, an employee go. We had an agreement. It was all, you know, we paid them uh, in line with the labor law. You know, like, I wouldn't call it retrenchment, but more like I had to let them go, so I need to compensate them, you know,
Yep.
blah, blah, blah. A few months later, I received a letter sent to the office saying that that person is taking us to court and suing us for like loss of income for 30 years.
For 30 years.
Yeah. So this was my first brush with the law.
Mm-hmm.
As a foreigner, I got my HR girl there, and we got our legal people there. So basically, it went into a settlement outside the court.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from Singapore, if you've been asked by your boss, you know, that to terminate your services, the company here in Singapore, based on the law, is that they would have to compensate you for the number of years in service, you know.
Yeah,
Plus
if you've only
the other
been
month.
6 months in the company, then you don't have as much compensation as if you've been, I don't know, 20 years in the
6
company.
years, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you just get accordingly, you know, and companies can give you more in terms of goodwill
Yeah.
for reasons. But it's slightly different in China. So I was a bit like, whoa, hang on, we signed the agreement, you know, the termination letter, we signed everything, you know,
Yeah.
that based on signing on this, you'll be entitled to this, 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 this. We paid him, this. And 3 months later, we were we were surprised. So long story short, we had a settlement outside court. It was for, I think, an additional 10 more months
Okay.
on top of what was really fairly given.
Mm-hmm.
So that was surprising for me. But I had to read up more about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was because of let's say something in Chinese law, or it was because the Chinese court favored the local as opposed to a foreign
Employees.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess those things happen. It's
Those
not
things
only
happen.
with It's not
And
only
I
with language that you have to localize.
It's all the little stuff. Yeah, there's all the little stuff. So that was my first experience. I I think when it comes to experiences, I wouldn't categorize them as bad or good, but I just say that's part of the learning curve
Yeah.
about understanding this country that you're in. I'm a visitor. I'm a guest.
Yes.
So yes, it was shocking that, oh my God, why is he suing us for like claiming 30 months extra? But sorry, 30 years. But in that sense, for us, it's a learning curve. So we understand that now, even though we had all the legal team on our side, creating the employment contract, the termination letter, blah, 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 but they can still go ahead and try and claim more for reasons like this.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. So from then on, we made sure our employment contract is so thick. There's like pages to it, to cover all the different factors and things like that. So that is on the business and business side of things in terms of the culture shock. I think on the personal front on culture shock, so I've been living with my parents up to the age of 26. That's when I moved to China. In Singapore, it's very common for children to live with parents for as long as possible because, firstly,
accommodation is so expensive in Singapore.
But then in China, some of my colleagues, they actually moved to Shanghai and they live like miles away. And they moved to Shanghai when they were really, really young, whether it's to study or just finish college in their hometown, and they decided to come to China, come to Shanghai to get a job. And they were like 19, 20 years old. And I think that's really young because to me, 20 years old, I'm still a baby in my parents' eyes. But for them, so that is something that was interesting. Again, that is because I'm coming from a different, from a different country. In Singapore, it's common. I've got friends who's
And
about my
Singapore
age.
is small.
Yeah.
So if you study in Singapore, you can easily live with your parents because.
Yeah. So that's, I think it's shocking for me from a personal side at that age when I first, visited there. I know it's common also in a lot of places other than Singapore where you leave your hometown and you go to the big cities to get a job and stuff like that. But that's interesting because I know of, they are not my colleagues, but they are like, working in restaurants or the spas, and they were like 14, 15 years old, leaving their hometown, like from a tier 3 city or province and coming to Shanghai to try and earn that. So that, it probably makes me sound like, oh my God, I'm such a, I live in a little bubble. But again, these are little things that actually make you want to understand what China is, because you think they're massive. You think everywhere is the same. You live in Shanghai, all the glitz and the glamour, the lights and the modern buildings and stuff like that. But then when you get out of Shanghai and you go to the, to the other cities, to the other provinces, things are different again. And that's the intriguing and the exciting thing about China.
Yeah.
And the same thing when brands want, if they want to market to China, it's not a case of one size fits all.
Not at all.
Your marketing campaigns have to be targeted.
Yes.
Not just based on China, but based on which city. Shanghai. Okay, so maybe the campaign for Shanghai will be different from those that's in, let's say, Harbin, for example, or Xi'an or things like that. So that's very interesting. It's just a massive spectrum.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that I was able to experience just a small part of it, like a very small part of it, of a big spectrum. I would love to go back as and when the borders are open to see my colleagues and stuff. It's interesting.
Yeah. So Joanne, thank you so much for taking the time today. To sum up a little bit before we finish, what would be your number one tip for people who are just going into international business?
Work with a local team.
Okay.
Be open to adaptations and changes, because what you know in your home market or what you've been doing in your home country may not necessarily work in other countries. So be open to changes, be open to adaptations. You may need to adapt a marketing campaign that you've done for Spain, you may have to use that and adapt it or change it even for other markets.
So people should also listen to the local advice of somebody locally,
Yeah.
as to what they need.
Yes. And also just work with people who's got experience in your industry, in what you're offering.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're from the hospitality, if you're doing travel, if you're doing consumer products, skincare, fashion, shoes, and you need help when it comes to the localization end of things, talk to me, because that's what we do all day.
Yeah.
that's what myself and my teams, my language teams, we do all day. We localize content for this industry. So hospitality, hotels, travel products, tourism, lifestyle, wine,
Mm-hmm.
F&B, consumer stuff. Yeah. So work with partners who are in the same industry as you, because they know the terms, they know what's needed to engage your customers or your visitors. So, and yeah, just be open, because no two markets are the same.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think it's one that really people do have to remember. Joanne, thank you so much for joining me today. Maybe just to finish up, you can tell us where people can find you if they're interested at working with you or with your team at IPP World. If people are coming from the hospitality or lifestyle sector, and where they can find you.
Yeah, sure. Well, they can visit our website. It's at www.ippworld.com,
Okay.
or connect with me on LinkedIn. Joanne Chan, Chan, Chan. I'm there. So connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat. I love talking about languages. I love talking about different markets. Thankfully, you gave me a limitation on how long I can talk. If not, this will go on and on and on. So
Yeah, we could talk all day. I think this is.
yeah. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, Joanne Chan, or just go to our website. You can also reach me from there. And yeah, just give me a shout.
Okay. Thank you for joining me today, Joanne. It's been brilliant.
Thank you for having me. I enjoy myself. This is fun. I like to do this again.
Okay.